Hello, and welcome to our second recap video of the Smogon low-tier Swiss portion of the tournament. Today we are going over weeks 3 and 4, and our opponent and ourselves are both currently 2 and 0. So we have a big undefeated match. Our opponent has a scary team, and honestly, I have never played against a Hisuian Braviary before. So pretty difficult. They also have two Ditto Pokemon to me, similar to last week. They had Grimmsnarl, and they also have Magneton, which they left, but I brought. So, getting into this battle, my plan was I didn't really have a good lead, so I made a Focus Sash lead Magneton to just deal damage. With Magnet Rise and Dual Stab, it hits most things decently well. Even Flash Cannon does a lot of damage to Palmont with Analytic, as you're about to see. But the Sash ended up not working out because he had U-turn Inteleon. The other parts of my plan were that Gallade was Agility and Dudunsparce was actually Coil Rest, anticipating him to get Toxic Spikes up. So the plan was, similar to last week, do as much damage as we can and hopefully sweep in the end. So in this turn, I thought Talonflame would be able to live a hit if it wasn't Specs. It did not. So lesson number 1 of this week is know what your opponent's Pokemon do. That was a big mistake of mine. Going against this opponent, I'd never played the Braviary, and I completely forgot Sheer Force boosted Air Slash. So that completely blew me back. That Braviary would just huge damage, knocked out Talonflame way earlier, so I was never able to remove the Toxic Spike. This week I did also bring an Assault Vest Grimmsnarl. I thought it was a pretty decent check into the Braviary, which sort of with Terra Electric it kind of makes it a little shakier. But we did have the Sucker Punch and the Stomping Tantrum that we were able to show off the double power on the Clodsire and knock it out. So Grimmsnarl has been pretty valuable. And at this point, I thought if there's ever a time to get set up with the Dudunsparce, it's right now. So I Terra'd into Fairy so the Smogon couldn't hit me, coiled once. I'm about to rest. I get taunted. I was Resto Chesto. After taunt, I can no longer heal myself. So Dudunsparce is never going to be able to set up again unless I can get in against the Smogon and not be taunted. Unfortunately, I never really get that opportunity. At this point, I'm just trying to deal damage with the Dudunsparce, planning on winning with Gallade in the endgame. So lesson number 2 of this battle was fast taunt is so important. He's shown taunt on the Grimmsnarl, completely shut down my setup to Dudunsparce. Later in the game, he will show taunt on Inteleon, and that stops my Gallade from setting up, and that stops my Gastrodon from ever recovering. It doesn't affect Grimmsnarl, or at least his Grimmsnarls doesn't. But in the end, that really doesn't matter, because he was able to just stop my setup threats from ever doing anything, and stopping my bulkier Pokemon from ever healing. So Grimmsnarl does pick up quite a few KOs in the end game. It technically got 4 because it knocked out Clodsire twice, which is kind of cool, I guess. And he shows Crunch, that does a lot of damage to Gastrodon. I'm constantly anticipating that he's going to taunt me to prevent me from healing. So I try not to. I decided to go ahead and sack the Dudunsparce here and bring in my Gallade. I did bring the Lumberry. Again, I kind of anticipated if he got T-Spikes up, it might be difficult for me to remove. So that was my way to deal with it. But of course, he just had the taunt. So he could just stop me from attacking, and even though I can Sacred Sword this Braviary, do massive damage with Adamant Gallade, it doesn't matter. He knocks me out with an Air Slash, and then a Psychic cleanly KOs Gastrodon. So we do lose game 3, and the way this Swiss works, every person that goes 8-0 is guaranteed top cut. Every person that goes 7-1 is guaranteed top cut. And then depending on your opponents, if you go 6-2, you may or may not make top cut. About 22 of 28 players did. So that means we have to win every game from here on out to guarantee a seat in top cuts. Alright, so now we've got our week 4 game. And this one is going to take a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and let it start going. I didn't really know the best way to deal with Vaporeon in this matchup. I knew my opponent really liked using it. So I brought a more annoying Dudunsparce set this week. I brought Glare with Rock Slide and Headbutt along with Roost so that I could essentially paralyze and flinch things down, making it about 70-something% in my favor that my opponent's not allowed to move. And as you can see, it immediately worked. It chipped down this Gardevoir, and he immediately brings in Donphan, which really surprised me because Flamigo could revenge me. Anything faster that could knock me out in 2 hits. And I guess he didn't want them paralyzed, but still yet, he shows Seed Bomb and Earthquake don't quite 2-hit KO me, so I can just start going for the headbutts and the rock slides again. There's really not a lot he can do about it. And he's getting frustrated in the chat, honestly, he and another viewer, but it's part of the game. It's something that Dudunsparce can do, and it's, spoiler alert, something that I use again. Dudunsparce, when it's trying to set up against either unaware Pokemon or Pokemon that just don't have very good offenses off rip, Headbutt Glare is very impactful. Obviously, I just 1v1 to Donphan and ended at 90% for it, even though it could hit me for 50% every turn. So I think kind of the first lesson for this one is tilting. And my opponent definitely tilted after this because he just showed he's Scarfed Flamigo. So even while paralyzed, it outspeeds because my Dudunsparce was super bulky and with some attack. So he could have just knocked it out earlier and still had a full health Donphan. But he didn't know. Maybe he was tilted. Maybe that affected his decision. And maybe that affects his decisions in the future. But anyway, we're able to instantly pick up the knockout on the Flamigo. Since it was paralyzed, it wasn't as much of a threat anymore. A concept to go over with my opponent's team is it was very top heavy. So when you look at a draft, you kind of have to analyze what are the threats and what do you prep less for. And I think some of the best drafts are where you have to prep for all 8 Pokemon or however many are drafted. That all of them are threats and none of them are just kind of like you had a couple extra points, so whatever. My opponent had 6 Pokemon that were worth, I think, 88 points, and so the last 2 had to be 1 point each. So he had Fracture, which is not that big of a threat into my team with Grimmsnarl, and he had Drifloon, which is just never going to show up. So I didn't even bother even looking at what it could do. That makes prep a lot easier when I only have to deal with 6 Pokemon as opposed to 8. If I know exactly what he's bringing, then I know I can deal with it. But as you can see, my opponent here really trying to put something to sleep is using a lot of Yawns. I expected to protect, which is why I didn't Volt Switch on the Vaporeon. So I'm kind of slow playing the end game, trying to make sure I don't throw because this is a Calm Mind Vaporeon. I really wanted to get a Trick Scarf onto it. Unfortunately, Moltres does actually come in and take that Scarf. When we're talking about luck, which is kind of lesson 2, always put luck in your favor. And that means if you have to run inaccurate moves, you know, that's what you've got to do. But if you can in any way make it more likely for you to win, that's more impressive. Speaking of luck, though, my opponent hitting all these Hurricanes is about the same odds as me getting those headbutt Flinches. So this is kind of an incredible display of luck on both sides, because if they had missed one Hurricane, I could have had a much healthier Gastrodon for this Weavile that just came in and can now revenge Gastrodon, which this battle actually got a little bit scarier because Gallade is not Scarfed anymore, so I risk getting flinched. Luckily for us, we don't get flinched, we knock out the Weavile, and then he proceeds to forfeit, but I will give the last kill to Gallade. So looking at my opponent's team, how we prep for it, and how we try to put luck in our favor as much as possible by running things like the Dudunsparce with Headbutt and Glare, you can see that building a path to victory starts in the team builder. So yeah, we were able to pull out this victory. We're now 3-1. We really don't want to drop another game, especially early. So we're going to keep going. We're going to try to hit 7-1. If not, 6-2 might make it. But we will see you tomorrow for the next recap.